Hello and welcome back. Today we're going to look at installing the bed in the van. Now this is going to be made primarily out of these aluminium extrusions. I think it was 40 mil, might have been 45, I can't remember. 45mm square aluminium extrusion, which will make up the frame. It's going to be bolted to the wall using these aluminium L sections. It's about 6mm thick, 3 inches by 2 inches. And then we got a bunch of hardware in the box here to connect to the aluminium extrusion to itself and also to this. And I had it planned out at some point. I can't remember exactly what I concluded, but I think I've got everything. Let's build a bed. I got this aluminium frame cut to size via an online supplier, which I'll link below, but it came with a few burrs and horrible edges on it, and so I started by sanding those back just to make it slightly easier to handle. Alright, so my bed is going to be stretched across widthways in the van. I am 6'1", but I tend to sleep on my side and sort of curl up a little bit, so I don't think length is going to be too much of an issue here. I wish I could say that more often. But anyway, the bracket's going to be mounted on this rib here. And I just need to figure out if there's any areas I need to avoid, which doesn't look like it. I think I can hit that entire thing. And this is going to be installed using riv nuts, which are going to be inserted into the frame here and then bolted through from the front. And I'm going to scatter them in a sort of zigzag shape to really make sure this is supported. And I reckon I could do them every sort of 150mm or something like that. That should give me around about 10 fixings in there, which I reckon will be hopefully enough. I don't know. I marked these out with an equal spacing using a tape measure, and probably for the first time in my life I accounted for the width of the socket that I was going to use to tighten these bolts, which is something I always forget to do and end up having to use an adjustable wrench or something painful like that to tighten these up. Alright, so I've just double checked it, quadruple, quintuple checked it to ensure both that it is safe to put the riv nuts into the ribs and also that the bike here still fits under the bed, which as far as I can see it does. So I'm going to get marking these holes with a nail punch and then we'll drill them out. So I'm just going to drill them out at 5mm to begin with, and then I'll enlarge them to fit the bolts that I intend to use. Once the brackets had been countersunk, I brought my laser level into the van to mark the height of the bed. Now you've got to be very careful when doing this, because if the van is parked at an angle or on a slope, you're not going to get an accurate reading when using the gravity setting. So what I did is I marked 4 points within the range of the laser that indicated the height of the bed using the ground as a datum. Once these lines had been marked, I realigned the laser level using the fixed setting, which would give me a plumb line joining all of the dots together. I then offered up the bracket to match those lines and marked the locations of the riv nuts. I'm going to be using these drill stop collars to prevent me going too deep when drilling out these riv nuts, and I'm going to incrementally increase the size of the drill bits up to the required size in order to sneak up on the fit. My stop collars didn't quite go up to the final size drill bit, and so I ended up drilling through a block of wood and used that as a stop instead. You've got to be a little bit careful when doing this because it is possible for the drill bit to catch the wood and have it spin in your hands. So yeah, just watch out for that when doing this. Make sure you're holding the block of wood somewhat loosely. After priming, I gave the brackets a once over with a sander, which gave them a really premium appearance. Okay, so I've never installed riv nuts before, but what I have heard from the amount of reviews and people talking about it is that it's worth investing in a decent one of these. So I've ended up going for this Sealey one. It comes with a bunch of threads and stuff like that. Really good reviews. A little bit more costly than the cheaper alternatives, but those cheaper alternatives, people were saying that once they'd wrenched the rivet nut into place, it still spun in the slot because it wasn't applying enough pressure and, you know, things like that. So I thought I'll get a nice one, nice handles. Can't really complain. I'll pop a link to it below. Okay, so the way this thing works is pretty simple, but it is a little bit fiddly to set up the correct amount of pressure at the top. Basically, you open it up, you thread on the nut you need at the end. This nut then gets inserted into the sheet metal, and then what you do is you squeeze the handles together, And you'll see on the end there, it's pulled the thread down that's on the top towards the head, and it's compressed the metal here. And ideally your sheet metal will be in that little black line at the bottom there. Okay, so it doesn't say to do this, but I'm going to put some Loctite 638 on the nuts. I actually use this stuff to assemble my marking knives, but primarily it's to stop rotational action from happening. And so if the grip on this isn't perfect, hopefully this will help sort of secure it a little bit further. But don't take my word for it though, I've never done this before. I'd recommend checking the comments below because there'll be someone there who is a bit more knowledgeable than me about this. So I'm going to test it on one of these middle ones because they're probably not as important as the edge. Shove it in there. And then we squeeze. Ooh-wee. Well, seems to be pretty good. I mean, yeah, that's pretty well in there. I like these. These are great. Okay, so we'll just swap it out to the M10 thread now for these big boys at the top. Oh, let me know. So when inserting these, the wrench will get to a certain point and it will stop, but it is possible to push it further. On this one here, I wanted to see what it would be like if I did push it further, as it's a pretty non-crucial one. And what it's done, it's very hard to see, but it's ever so slightly pulled the metal out around it. There's like a sort of raised area. And I'm pretty sure that's not what you want to be going for when you're using this. So when you do, squeeze it and you'll feel it sort of buckle and close up. Don't push it any further than that because it's just going to start doing this. I guess arguably it is a tighter joint, but also it's probably sort of damaged the thread a little bit like that. It's buckled the metal around it. It's probably not needed. But again, I might be wrong on that. Check the comments because there's probably some people there who know more than me. But I must say, given the fact I've been able to buckle the sides of my van with this thing, I think that shows that this is a pretty good wrench. So yeah, I feel pretty happy recommending this. I'll pop a link in the description below if you want it. It's the Sealey something or other, I don't know, there's a link down there. A little bit more costly than the alternatives, but if you look at the reviews for the alternatives, you'll see why I went for this. Not worth the risk. God, I'm gonna have proper boobs by the end of this. Pecs, I mean. All right, moment of truth. Let's see if they all line up. I'm so glad I sanded these. They look absolute mint. Oh, well, it's looking good so far. Okay, we got some very slight misalignment. I could get them in, but it's going to start cutting into the aluminium, might start destroying the thread. So I'm just going to widen the holes in this aluminium by like 1 millimeter or so, and that will give these a little bit of wiggle room, but there'll still be plenty enough there to properly wrench it down. Okay, so I've just widened the 8 millimeter holes to 8.5, the 10 millimeter ones to 10.5. Should give me enough wiggle room, I reckon. The same bolt ended up being pretty stubborn, and if you listen out in 3, 2, 1, that was the sound of the riv nut failing, and it ended up spinning in the steel of the van. And so we'll come back to that once I finish fitting this other bracket. Right, so obviously you heard that sort of bang earlier. That is because one of the riv nuts has started spinning in there. I don't believe it's because of the pressure applied by the wrench. I think it's because this hole was slightly misaligned and it's just put too much stress on the riv nut itself, and yeah, it's caused it to just start spinning in the body of the van. It's not going to tighten, it's not going to loosen. So you can sort of see the nut there, and if I turn it, you can see the whole thing turns rather than just the bolt. Now I've tried getting down there with these long nose pliers to sort of grip the outside of the nut while spinning it, but I'm not getting enough purchase with these. So what I'm going to try and do is get a multi-tool down there and see if I can cut a flat spot on the top and bottom of that riv nut, so then I can get a bit more purchase with these. But the last thing I want to do here is cut the top of the riv nut off completely, because then I've got no chance other than drilling out the bolt here. So we've got one flat spot on top there. Just need to spin the bolt around now and see if we can get one on the other side. Unfortunately, however, this didn't work, so I ended up needing to cut the entire bolt off using the multi-tool and then remove the riv nut using rather barbaric means. Okay, so the obvious answer here is I could re-drill this out and insert an M10 riv nut into it. But firstly, I don't have any other M10 riv nuts. The pack I contained only has 10 and I've used all of them. Secondly, it would really annoy me if all the top ones were M10, all the bottom ones were M8, apart from this one. As stupid as it sounds, I know, I really want this to be M8, and I've got some of them. So it's a little bit too loose for an M8 at the moment. I think it could grip somewhat okay, but there is obviously a risk of it slipping again and having to go through that whole process. One option is to put a bolt through there, and because I found out I can get behind with my arm, I could put a nut on the back of it. And that's all very well, but if I ever needed to take the bed out in the future, this area is going to be stuffed with insulation, so I'm not going to be able to get back there very easily to hold onto that nut to undo it. So really, I still want it to be a riv nut. This is a sheet of steel that was previously where the windows now are. Did that make any sense? You get what I mean. My plan with this steel was to drill a hole in it and then cut some sort of polygon around it and then fix this into place on the backside of that steel bracket. Then I could thread a riv nut through the ruined steel into this new plate that's on the backside of it and then crush the riv nut around it to hold it in place. I think this is gonna work. Oh, we got squeeze out. We got squeeze out. Come on. I think that did it. I think that did it. Plug that up and pop a bit more primer on it. And then we'll just leave that to harden for a little bit. Right, let's see if we managed it. It's worked. I'm not going to fully tighten it yet, just to give that epoxy a bit longer to go off, but that's great. That's brilliant. Alright, so next we're going to start cutting the aluminium extrusions to size to bridge across here, and then once those are done we'll start doing the ones that go across. There's quite a lot of aluminium. I think I could have gone for 40mm. 45 is excessive. Alright, 1780 be the width of my van. So I've basically just got to trim 20mm off the end of these. Okay, so I'm going to be cutting the aluminium extrusion on the miter saw. You can cut aluminium with a normal wood cutting blade, but it is better if you buy a dedicated blade that's made for aluminium. This is a non-ferrous metal saw blade, and it actually says on here good for aluminium extrusion. If you are, however, going to be using a wood blade for this, make sure that you're using a negative rake blade. That's what you should be using for a miter saw regardless. Negative rake basically means the teeth are angled back slightly, and what that means is when you pull down, the saw doesn't want to run towards you like that because of the hook teeth. All right, before we commit to cutting them all to that length, let's see how it fits. Like a bug. Oh yeah, that is solid. Yeah, this is going to be fine. Okay, so I want these to be flush with the fronts of the brackets there. So I'm just going to set up a small combination square to mark the center of this groove, which is, yeah, it's going to be sitting somewhere around there. Slide this back out of the way, and then we'll just put a line all the way down. Same on the other side. All right, so now I've just got to drill out all eight of these holes in order to bolt down the aluminium extrusions. Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely a little bit long for it, but I think this will work. I tend to curl up a little bit when I sleep, so that is solid. All right, so I've just bought a ton of poplar in order to make up the bed slats. Definitely bought more than I need, but I don't care. This stuff is an inch thick, and I'm probably going to go, well, they definitely need to be 1400 millimeters long. And in terms of width, probably 3 inches or so, 75 mil. Thickness, maybe, I don't know, 20 mil, something like that. They don't need to be too thick because I do have that supporting rail down the middle of the bed. Of course, you don't need to go to the same lengths as I am here by creating your own slats. Any timber will work for this if you're using the same bed construction as me. Something around 3 inches wide, which is about 75 millimeters by 3/4 of an inch thick, roughly 19 or 20 millimeters, should be absolutely fine. You can buy timber at these precise dimensions at pretty much any DIY merchant you go to. I haven't really figured out the maths for these things yet, so I just did as many as I thought I might need. Alright, so to fix these in, we're going to be using some countersunk bolts that will go through the top here and then bolt into a nut that's in the T-track. The length of these needs to be 35 mil. So all I need to do is get a hole that's centered in here while also being in line with the T-track below. Now, I know I joke a lot on this channel, but I'm being serious at this point. Don't copy the method I'm about to do for this. I'm in a bit of a pinch. I don't have the right tool for it. I don't have the time to get the right tool for it. So I'm going to do something a little bit naughty. Don't follow it, please. This is the pickle I'm in. This is the bolt that I'm hoping to insert into the slats, and the head on it is 20 millimeters wide. Trouble is, my biggest countersink is this, which I think is about 16. Not big enough to countersink the entire head. You can get bigger countersinks, but it's the end of Friday and I can't get one delivered until next Tuesday, so it's not going to work. The next option is to use a router with some sort of guide bush in the bottom. This guide bush would be located on a jig with a 30 millimeter hole. This slots into it. The slat gets located underneath using some sort of stop, and then the router cutter would plunge through that into the wood. But as you can see, there's the problem. It doesn't bloody fit. I did also consider making some sort of platform like this that would encapsulate the router itself, and then that platform could stop in the right position to then be plunged down, concentric to the hole below. But that's quite a lot of faff to go through for the sake of countersinking 24 holes. So I have ordered a larger countersink, and I have ordered a larger guide bush that the router cutter can fit through. But to get me out of the predicament I'm in now, I'm gonna have to do something a bit naughty. Because it's just a plunge cut we're doing, I'm gonna put the router bit in the drill. Seriously, don't do this. Router bits aren't designed to go in drills. I mean, a pillar drill, I know that I can kind of get away with, but I have known people to put router bits in, you know, just normal drills like this and be injured by it. They didn't know any better at the time because they were just sort of getting into the world of woodworking, but I'm telling you now, router bits do not go in drills. Router bits go in routers, would you believe? Don't copy me, please. Right, so the slats aren't fixed down yet, but you can get a sort of basic idea. Oh, yeah, so being 6'1", 6'2", I can't really sleep lengthwise, but I tend to curl up a little bit when I sleep anyway. Sleeping diagonally though. Oh, I think that'll be all right. I like that. Now this thing is a T-track bolt. It's an M8 thread with a little T on the end, and these are designed to fit in the track, so then you can get a nut to tighten against the top, and it's what allows you to clamp things down to this profile. For me, however, I need this the other way round. So this is the male thread coming from underneath. I need the male thread to come from above because that's what I've got with these bolts. So in fact, what I need, instead of a T-bolt, I need a T-nut. Now, I'll be honest, I completely spaced ordering these and the delivery window is in 7 days' time. So I'm going to end this video here because you can probably get a gist of what the bed's going to be like. But there are a few additional decorative things I'm going to do to this later in the project. So if you want to see that, be sure to stick around. As always, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please don't forget to press the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next one.